that the Midrash says, Hashem says to Moshe, the Kom Nikas Bnei Yisrael, you should avenge the vengeance of the Jewish people against your Midianites. What is the connotation of you? Ato ba'atzmecho. You personally should be involved. V'u'meshalech acherim. But yet, he himself sends others. He himself was not part of the battle, Moshe. Moshe sent Pinchas. So Rashi alludes to this question, and he cites a different Midrash. The Midrash answers that because Pinchas is the one who actually began this act of zealotry to stop the plague when he killed the Midianite princess. So there's an expression, principle, Kol hamaschal b'mitzvah emelo gemar. If you begin a mitzvah, you tell that person he should bring the mitzvah to its completion. So since Pinchas began the mitzvah of the Kiddush Hashem when he killed the Midianite princess, it's up to you. You should have the first rights to complete it. That's why Pinchas was sent and Moshe himself did not go. That's Rashi. However, the Midrash Chuma explains it differently. Al sheniz gadol b'Midian. When Moshe fled from Egypt, he spent 60 years in Midian. That was his location of refuge. He says it wouldn't be appropriate. I personally should be the one to bring this suffering upon them because they did me a favor. I was a beneficiary of their hospitality. Therefore, it's the wrong thing for me personally to lead the battle to have them destroyed. Hamoshel. What is it analogous to? The wellspring from which I drank water, al tishbo oven. You shouldn't throw a stone in that well. If you benefited, there's no way you should be the one to destroy the well. We find that Moshe Rabbeinu, when he was told to strike the earth by the plague of lice, we find that Aaron struck the earth to bring about that plague. When he was told to strike the Nile, Aaron struck the Nile, not Moshe. Why? So over there, Chazal tell us, the Midrash tells us that because since Moshe was a beneficiary of the Nile and of the earth, when he was put into the Nile by his mother, miraculously, he did not drown. So because he was a beneficiary of the Nile, it would be the wrong thing for him to smite it, to change it from its natural function to something else. When he killed the Egyptian, since he hid the Egyptian in the earth, as it says, even though later it was revealed through the informing of Dasan of Aviram, but he was a beneficiary of the earth, it would be the wrong thing for him to hit the earth. So over here, even more so, the Midianite community were his host to a degree. He was a beneficiary of their community. It'd be the wrong thing for him to destroy Midian. Therefore, it was delegated through Pinchas. That's the Midrash. Meaning that God said you. But again, God could have said Pinchas, not you. There's so many takeaways. When God says certain things, there's what we call Das Torah. Das Torah means, although it seems to be black and white, the way it should be seen, but the person who has that Torah mind, because there's so many other variables, those other variables play into understanding exactly how to navigate the terrain. And since there is a concept known as that if you're a beneficiary, it would be the wrong thing for you to actually do something which is contrary to that source of your benefit, and it can be done differently. If there's no other way to do it, you do it. But since it could be delegated, and it was delegated through Pinchas, therefore Moshe himself understood he did not have to do it, and this would be satisfactory or even the correct thing to do in the eyes of Hashem. Therefore, he says that since I'm a beneficiary, it would be the wrong thing for me to do it. So now that one of two things. Is it because it's wrong in its essence, or it's wrong because the takeaway is not a good takeaway? What I'm saying is, if it's wrong because you're a beneficiary, regardless, so then you have to delegate it. You have no choice. But if it's a takeaway meeting, it will be Chil Hashem. In truth, they deserve to be destroyed. I'll give you an example. A person hosts you, and you're a tremendous beneficiary. Then the person chooses and wants to take your life. There's a law that a person who rises to kill you, you have an obligation, based on the concept of self-defense, to kill your attacker. But you're such a beneficiary of the past, of all the good he did for you. The past has nothing to do with the present. Presently, he wants to kill me. You have an obligation to defend your life, and you take the life of your attacker. Moshe Rabbeinu, as much as he was a beneficiary in the past, but this community plotted to destroy Klal Yisrael. That's what he did. So I think in terms of either we'll make a differentiation, and also he was a beneficiary directly of his father-in-law, of Yisro. Doesn't make a difference. Living in that community with all the support systems, he's considered beneficiary. So I think which to me is closest to the correct understanding, it's the takeaway is not a good takeaway. As the Gemara tells us that Rav, because he was a leading Torah sage, if he would not pay the bill to the butcher on time, it would be a Chil Hashem. Why? Because what would the butcher say? The butcher would say that if the rabbi doesn't pay me on time and he's stealing from me, I have a right to steal from others. Although it's a misunderstanding. Being late on paying your bill is not stealing. But to the butcher that he wants to be paid when he's supposed to be paid, holding up the butcher is considered you're stealing from me. So what's the butcher's takeaway? Although it's total ignorance, doesn't make a difference. But if that's the takeaway, and the source is Rav, because he delayed payment, Rav always made sure to pay on time. That this takeaway should never be a takeaway. Moshe Rabbeinu, in terms of what he was permitted to do, he could have done it. But because the takeaway would be, if I benefited from these people, is that really the correct way to reciprocate, to repay to bite the hand that fed you? It's the wrong thing. Therefore, since Moshe Rabbeinu was able to do it through delegating it, through Pinchas, therefore he chose not to do it himself. There's a pasuk in Eov where Eov says, Lo yigra mitzadik einov. God would not deny from the tzaddik what his eyes wants to see. Mal lo yigra tzaddik einov, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu menea min tzaddik ma sherotze l'uros beinov. Hashem will not deny from the tzaddik something that he wants to see with his own eyes. He wants to see it personally. Lalamdoch, this is interesting. Shem Moshe misav liros b'nikmas hamidyonim kodim shiamus. What Moshe wanted to see, Bidja destroyed before he dies. He wanted to witness this. It shouldn't happen after he passes away. That he wants to see it personally. He wants to see their destruction. V'olav nemar yireh yismach tzadik ki chosok nokom. The tzaddik will rejoice when he sees the revenge taken against the perpetrators. It's not finished, the pasuk. It's pasuk matilim. Yismach tzadik ki chosok nokom. The tzaddik will rejoice when he sees the revenge. Pomav yirchatz b'dam rosho. At his feet, he will wash in the blood of the evil. To that degree. Yismach Moshe, Zeb Moshe. Yismach Tzadik, that's Moshe. Ki chosed nokom, when he will see the revenge, nikmas medyon. Pomav yirchatz b'dam harosho. His feet he will wash in the blood of the evil. Zeb Bilam. Oma Moshe, that's Bilam. Meaning, when Bilam was killed in this battle, that's the equivalent. He will wash his feet in the blood of this evil man. That will be joy for him. Okay? So now, why did Moshe want to see it firsthand? He personally, it says, Yismach Tzaddik, the Tzaddik will rejoice when he sees the revenge against the Rasha. Moshe says to Hashem, I want to see their destruction before I die. And Hashem fulfilled the request. We say in the Avinu Malkeinus, according to some texts, Nikom dam avodecha leinenu, dam hashofuch leinenu. Avenge the blood of the Jews before our eyes. We ask Hashem, we should see how Hashem avenges the blood of the Jews. We personally want to see it. The question is why? Why do you want to see it? What are we bloodthirsty? Hashem can do what he does. What do you have to be there to witness it firsthand? But this is the source. It's a source in Tehillim that Moshe Rabbeinu asked that he personally wants to see the evil being destroyed, to avenge the Jewish people. So we want to witness how Hashem avenges the bloodshed of the Jews throughout all the centuries or the millennia. That's what we want to see. But why? What is that? What is seeing it? Now, when a person sees something, we're touched in a certain way. When you're touched, either you're touched negatively or very positively, or you're not fazed, either way. But the way you're touched, very often, speaks about where you're at. I'll give you an example. A person sees a Kiddush Hashem. He witnesses a Kiddush Hashem, God's name being sanctified. You go to the Sima Shas and you have 100,000 people answering Amen Yeshmei Rabbah or saying Shema Yisrael, and you're touched by this. What does that mean? If you're touched by that, it says something about what it means that a person is witnessing such a sanctification of God's name that tells you who you are to a degree. That itself is the Kiddush Hashem. That you're touched that way. If you would not be touched by that, it says it's not first and foremost in your life. Because otherwise, if it would have been the ultimate, you'd be touched. So when you're touched itself, that itself is the Kiddush Hashem itself. It tells you where you are at. Moshe Rabbeinu, understanding the evil that they tried to perpetrate, and they did. 24,000 people died in the plague. And their intent initially was to destroy the Jewish people. And if not for Pinchas' intervention, we would have been destroyed. And this was done through the advice of Bilam, when he said, Elokem shel soni zima, the God of the Jewish people, he will not tolerate licentiousness. Now that he sees Midian being destroyed, which the Orach Chaim HaKadosh explains it wasn't so simple. Moshe Rabbeinu had to choose the people. They had to be at a special level of righteousness, because this wasn't a physical battle. This was a spiritual battle between good and evil. And Moshe Rabbeinu orchestrated every aspect of this battle, and Pinchas represented him. So Moshe Rabbeinu, being involved in every aspect and witnessing it, this was his ultimate joy, to see God's name being avenged. And he said, Nikbas Hashem b'Yisrael. This tells us who Moshe Rabbeinu is. If Moshe Rabbeinu rejoiced at that level, this is the ultimate Kiddush Hashem. Not that it was expected less, but even so, Moshe Rabbeinu wanting to have that level of joy, to seeing God's name being avenged, that's the ultimate Kiddush Hashem. You know, very often, you go into a school, and in today's day and age, you walk into a yeshiva, an elementary school, and you see young children studying, and there's a decorum. I remember when my oldest daughter, she graduated in elementary school, so in Rockland County, the head of the education system, he came to the graduation and he spoke. And the girls, they wear uniforms. What's the uniform? A blue skirt and a white blouse. And they were there for the graduation. When he walked in, they stood up at like cadets at West Point. They stood up for him. That's the level of respect they showed to him. So when he started to speak, before he could speak, he couldn't get a word out of his mouth. He was crying. And he made it a public statement. He says, this level of respect and reverence that's taught here, that these girls have respect for an older person, to show this level of respect, to stand up in unison in a moment, this is something which is beyond being impressed. He was touched. It's something you don't see. It's something, and even if you do see it, it's something very impressive. Another person couldn't care less. Stand, not stand. It depends where you're coming from. But if you appreciate and understand what decorum is and what respect is, you're touched by it, especially if it's a rare commodity. To be touched by Kiddush Hashem, and it should be touched in every aspect of your intellect and your emotion, that itself is the Kiddush Hashem, that we respond in the way we should respond, and that's Moshe, that's Yismach Tzadik B'Nekom Rosho. The Tzaddik rejoices when, so we say, Avinu Malkeinu, Nikom Nikmas Dam Avadecha Shafuch Le'inenu. Avenge the blood of Avadecha, of your servants, that was spilled Le'inenu. Avenge that blood before our eyes. We should witness that. It's not just, we're going to take revenge. They got theirs. No. Le'inenu, that we should see Hashem as the Dayan Emes, that there is justice meted out. And justice ultimately is going to, there is a day of reckoning, and the day of reckoning, there's nothing which is left not addressed. Hatzur Tomim Polo. That the rock is perfect. His actions, his justice, Chol Droch of Mishpat, his ways are all justice. There's no iniquity. So when we see that, we see it, we're touched in that itself is the Kiddush Hashem. We have a visit.